Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. Before we begin our meeting, I just want to go over just a few housekeeping items. First, if you are interested in speaking to the commission about one of the items on the agenda, please fill out one of these forms that's located on the desk just outside of the chambers. If you are not an applicant, if you're an applicant, we're going to call on you to speak anyway. Please remember that to give us your name and address for the record whenever you come up to the microphone. Limit your comments to 5 minutes, and please avoid any repetitious comments. If your neighbor's bringing up your concern about drainage, there's no need for you to also bring up the concern about drainage because we've heard that concern. I would encourage you, if you have a large group of neighbors who are here to speak about the same issue, that you get one person to tell us all of the issues that the neighbors share so that we can, and I promise I'll give them a little bit extra time to make sure that we've covered all those issues, but it makes it easier for us to all process those concerns. We follow the golden rule of treating each other as you'd like to be treated and respecting the process that we have, and so just ask for your patience as we move forward. So with that being said, we're ready to begin our agenda, and we'll start with receipt of the minutes from the January 25th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to receive the January 25th meeting minutes.
Commissioner Clare moves to receive the minutes of the January 25th meeting. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes.
Can I just vote aye?
I think so. Bear with us on the technology. Let's see if we... There we go.
No.
Okay, now we can vote. All right, and the motion passes. We're now in line for continuance requests, and we'll begin with uncontested requests.
Item 15, case PC 10898, defer to February 22nd. Item 16, case PC 10914, defer to February 22nd. Item 17, SPUD 1598, defer to February 22nd. Item 18, case PC 10904, defer to March 28th. Item 19, SPUD 1597, defer to March 28th. Item 20, case PC 10891 has been withdrawn, and item 21, case PC 10909 has also been withdrawn.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who wanted to be heard on any of those items? All right, then we're just looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the uncontested continuance requests as read.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve the uncontested continuance requests as read. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes.
I did, yes.
There we go. And the motion passes. Are there any new requests?
I have a couple.
Let's get,
I think I've got them all, so I'll read through them and then we'll see if there are additions. So I have number 9, SPUD 1590, a request to defer to February 22nd. Item 10, SPUD 1593, request to defer to February 22nd. Item 12, case SPUD 1588, defer to February 22nd. And item 13, SPUD 1596, also to February 22nd.
is there anything else, Commissioner Powers?
That's it.
All right. Is there anyone here wishing to be heard on any of those items, items 9, 10, 12, or 13 on your agenda? Then we're just looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the new continuance requests as read.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve the new continuance request as read. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're in line for the consent docket.
Item 1 is case C-7619, final plat of Windsgate 3, located north of Southwest 44th Street and east of South County Line Road.
Just looking for, is there anyone here wishing to be heard on that item, item number 1? All right, then we just need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the consent docket.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve the consent docket. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes.
Need to update that.
Oh. It's all good. Just need the moved by should be Commissioner Clare. If it's possible, to switch it. Say it again. Oh, it's saying, oh. I voted. I need to vote.
Yay.
But are we able to change it? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we were trying to correct the moved by. That's all right.
Just for the record. Okay. Do we get it right? Gotta love it. It's like, we used to think it was easier with just the manual voting. I'm sure it was way harder for you all to keep track, though. I bet it was way more difficult. Okay, I think if it can be corrected administratively, then it's good. Yeah,
That's
then
fine.
I think we're good. Okay, well then we'll move on to items requiring a separate vote, and we'll begin with item 2.
Item 2 is PUD 1382 SP02, application for a specific plan pursuant to the approval of PUD 1382, located at 16301 Ironstone Place.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This is a specific plan application for a Buffalo Wild Wings. It is consistent with the PUD. Happy to answer any questions.
This is in Ward 8, Commissioner Noble.
I'm looking at the specific plan, and it met all everything for the PUD, and it looks like just the normal Buffalo Wild Wings. So I had no problems with it. If no other commissioners have a problem,
Any comments, questions from commissioners? I think we're ready for a motion.
I'd like to recommend approval of PUD 1382 SP02.
Is we approving that outright, or does it go to City Council? Commissioner Noble moves to approve of the special permit number 2 to PUD 1382. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
The motion passes. We're in line for item 3.
This is PUD 1885-SP01, application for a specific plan pursuant to the approval of PUD 1885, located at 12024 Northwest Expressway.
Good afternoon, Kendall Dillon with Crafton Toll, representing the applicant. Specific plan for PUD 1885, sites there generally at Northwest Expressway and Piedmont Road. It conforms to the PUD, and be happy to answer any questions.
This is in Ward 1, Commissioner Clare.
Yeah, I don't have anything. So,
Any other questions, concerns? I think we're just looking for a motion.
okay. Just for the record, I'd like to note staff's review of the specific plan for the development indicates the proposal is consistent with the PUD 1885 Master Design Statement and Master Development Plan, and I will make a motion to recommend or to approve item PUD 1885 SP01.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve of the special permit number 1 to PUD 1885. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're in line for item 4.
Item number 4 is case C7624, preliminary plat of Lincoln Meadows. This is located south of Northwest 122nd Street and east of North Council Road, and variances to sections 5.3.1.d.5, 5.2.a, and table 5.1 in section 5.3.2.a of the subdivision regulations.
Excellent. Thank you.
Kim Cunningham with NAFA Engineering. We're looking for 2 variances on this. The proposed preliminary plan is 42 houses to be built on this property. We're looking for extending the length of the drive and cul-de-sac to 1,200 feet versus 800 feet. And we're looking for a variance to add 42 houses on this site with the addition that each house be sprinkled to accompany this request. And then we've also added a 50-foot right-of-way easement at the front, directed by Nate Clare, and that's been incorporated in these drawings.
Okay. Commissioner Clare? Any comments? And we do have one person signed up to speak.
We can go ahead and hear from them.
Okay. First, we have, well, we only have one person signed up. It's Kyle Goodwin.
Thank you all for hearing me today. Basically, I represent the adjacent landowner, 7732 Northwest 122nd. We are going to object at the city council level based on the amount of deviation from the normal regulation. We've got 44 lots, including the two common areas. That's 146% of the regulated density. You've got a 1,250-foot length requested with a 700 permitted, which is 178% of the regulated length. You have lack of stub outs in this particular plat, which would prevent adjacent property from being developed. If you look at the development just further east on the right side here, that one has stub outs, and so that the middle lot there is going to end up being landlocked. And my client is on the adjacent property on the west, which has been a horse farm for over 50 years. The natural slope of the land is going to be to drain towards our clients, and we believe the lack of a sidewalk plan, lack of a landscape plan, which should prevent this from being passed. In essence, the objection is based on the number of variances, the deviation amount from the normal regulated variance, and the impact that it's going to have on my client's property, and the impact on the development of the two adjacent properties due to lack of stub outs.
Several questions for you. One, well, just one for your information, this is not going to city council.
I'm sorry.
Just a couple of things. One, this item is not going to city council.
Okay.
We are the last stop.
Okay.
But there will be a final plat, so there are some opportunities for us to make some adjustments. So as far as I know, this level of density is consistent with the zoning that this property already is under. So as far as the concern of this being too many homes, this is consistent with the zoning that's already been allowed. 'cause
This is
we're
a
at the
low-level
plating
density, I think, and this would be a high-density plat.
stage. Okay, but this is consistent with the zoning, correct? Because the plating stage is now where we determine what the appropriate level of density is. That would have been done when it was zoned.
Yeah, Jared Martin, Planning Department. Yeah, it's zoned R1, so the lot sizes that are shown and the density that's shown is something within the tolerances of an R1 zoning. I think he is correct, there are more lots on the cul-de-sac than what we normally allow.
Okay.
But as far as the overall density, it's within the tolerance.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So one of the other concerns that you addressed, and I don't know if you and your client have had an opportunity to visit about this, is you're saying you do want them to have access, they should provide the access to both the west side and the east side.
They should, yes.
Which I completely agree with you, but I guess we'll settle that question. What did I miss? Any other concerns?
The length of you've got one straight street through here. The regulation is 700 feet. This is 1,250 feet, again, 170.
Yeah. So the streets, if they provide street stubs, that makes that a non-issue.
It would.
Yeah, cool. Anything else for us?
No, that'd be all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And you remember, you're going to get another shot at this too, if we're going to see where we end up after we discuss it a little bit further.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. You want to come back up for questions from us? Go ahead, Nate.
So, well, I'm gonna say, in my opinion, you're halfway there. You've got the street stub coming from the east, you need one going west. We need two street stubs.
I agree.
I didn't hear the question.
You've provided a street stub to the neighborhood or potential future neighborhood to the east. We want to see a street stub to the west. Okay.
And then,
And then that takes care of the variance that you're looking for the 1,200-foot cul-de-sac.
Okay.
So those should be provided, those street stubs should be provided basically so that they don't create a cul-de-sac longer than 800 feet. So they should be provided far enough south to.
Okay, so am I understanding two street stubs, east and west side?
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll
which is-
allow for those properties on either side, if and when they should develop as neighborhoods, residential, then there's the ability to connect to them.
Okay.
Where, I'm sorry, yeah.
On the other picture,
from the other plat map, which one was the stub on the east?
It's not shown here. They've provided, I think that common area, they're providing that as an easement. So,
So the east stub would be there.
yes.
Okay.
I think that'd probably be too far north and it wouldn't allow.
Yeah, that doesn't meet the 800
Right.
foot. The
Right.
thought was that if you go back to the other map, that's approximately where it aligns with Northwest 121st Street.
Right.
Okay.
But the question is, could you provide a stub to the west further south? So they wouldn't align, which is okay, but if you provided a stub to the west further south, if that satisfies the 800 feet?
So then I guess the question is, what level of specificity, like what language needs to be in the preliminary plat to ensure that that variance is not necessary?
Nate, what if the one on the west matched up with 120th Street so that they're matching the two over there? Then it'd be very specific.
Yeah. That would make sense so long as whatever remaining road to the south is less than 800 feet.
It would be. Jared?
I guess I would have a question. Are you trying to avoid the cul-de-sac length variance?
Yes.
I mean, I think the variance is still needed for now, because even if with the stub, until it connects to something else, you're still going to have a long cul-de-sac until the next development develops. So it is kind of a temporary variance.
But isn't the intent of the cul-de-sac in order to provide an area for an apparatus to turn around?
Right.
Or not have to back up an excessive length?
It has to meet that requirement, doesn't it? It
Yeah,
has
I
to be
mean,
big
the-
enough for
Right.
emergency vehicles to turn.
Yeah, the radius of the cul-de-sac has to meet the standard to allow that
Okay.
to happen, but we also have the standard for the length of the cul-de-sac. Right, so in my opinion, it still requires the variance. You know, if it doesn't ever develop, then you're stuck with just a really long cul-de-sac that has street stubs. But if it does, then eventually that need for that variance would go away.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem with the variance, just was trying to
Is there?
be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, yeah. Well, we'd have another opportunity to look at, I guess in the final plat,
Yeah.
seeing exactly where the stub's gonna be and consider it from there. Okay. So we don't need number two, because we're gonna require it. Or I guess we don't need to take action, they'd be required to take.
Yeah, street stubs are required.
Okay, so we
Or
don't-
a variance, so it's fine as is.
Okay. And so then we just need to consider variances to, the variance to number, we need to consider 4 and 5, as far as the TEs. Okay. All right, then I think we're just looking for a motion.
And then we're gonna add a TE, that street stub, or just TE2 cover it, but we wanna add that street stub to the west.
Okay,
I think as long as if we do.
Oh, east and west, it says east and west here. Number 2 says east and west.
so as long as we take no action,
Yeah.
we eliminate TE2, they're already required to stub to the east,
Yep.
to the west and east.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, move to approve the variance to section 5.2.8.A of the subdivision regulations relating to the maximum number of lots allowed on a single entrance.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve of a variance to section 5.2.8.A of the subdivision regulations relating to the maximum number of lots allowed on a single entrance. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Newman. Please cast your votes. And that motion passes.
Okay. Then I will move to approve the variance to table 5.1, section 5.3.2.A of subdivision regulations.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve of the variance to table 5.1 and section 5.3.2.A of the subdivision regulations.
There's not, yeah, okay,
related to the length of the maximum length of a cul-de-sac. Looking for a second. Commissioner Powers seconds the motion. Please cast your votes.
Yeah.
And the motion passes. Now we're just looking for a vote overall on the item.
Move to approve item C 7624.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve of C 7624,
We're good with all the other TEs, I guess?
Subject to the
subject to
technical,
the technical evaluations. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. The motion passes. For Mr. Goodwin's benefit, I'm not sure, we're not sending notice, right, for the final plat, correct? Or they do send notice? So so your client should be getting notice when the final plat comes. So, okay,
And it also speaks to the landscaping plan and everything.
and all of that. So we'll
Yes.
see more details of that
Right.
at the final plat stage. But thank you to the applicant, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're in line for item 5.
Item 5 is case number SP 585, application for a special permit to operate use unit 300.68, spectator sports and entertainment, high impact in the AA Agricultural District, located at 4905 North Morgan Road.
Good afternoon, Caitlin Turner, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. The application before you is to allow for a rodeo event to occur on site. Staff does recommend approval with the TE that the rodeo operation shall conform to the hours of operation and conditions of the program description. So by conditioning the program description, the property owners will only be able to act and operate the site in the confines of the program description. So there's limiting language in there, maximum of 15 events per year. We have the Saturday and Sunday hours of operation from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
You want to respond to the protest letter?
The protest letter, I did reach out to the protester. I think the main concern was the status of Morgan Road. Of course, their site is, of course, to the south, where they are expecting to develop more intense commercial uses there. So spoke to them. I have reached out since then with no response. But again, based on our conversation, the main concern was really just with their potential future access off of Morgan Road if they were to expand that commercial to the east. So no further conversation was had, and they didn't have any concern with the actual use there.
Cool. Commissioner Clare?
I have no questions or concerns, so I'm ready to make a motion if there's no further discussion.
There's no one signed up. Appreciate the effort from the attorney that
Thank
did
you so
outstanding work
much.
on this, because we were concerned about this getting out of hand. But it's already been in existing use, which is comforting, and I think we put a lot of good limiting language in it. So
All right,
I'm good unless there's other questions.
I'll move to approve item SP 585.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve of SP 585, recommend approval of special permit 585. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're in line for item 6.
Item 6 is case PC 10916, application to rezone of 4228 Northeast 20th Street from R1 to R2.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Harlan, representing Nelmo Investments. We are looking to rezone 2 lots in the Garden Oaks District from R1 to R2 to build duplexes a duplex on each lot. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there's.
Excellent. And thank you for taking some time and visiting with the neighbors. You want to tell us about how that went?
So yes, I reached out to Joyce Willis, and she set up a meeting with the neighborhood association and a few key players. Mainly, they just had questions on what was going to be done. I was able to pull up the plans. They were able to look at the plans, questions about tree removal, sidewalks, things of that nature. I felt I was able to answer those, how much it's going to be rented for, and things of that nature. Obviously, that's still kind of to be settled later as far as bill costs, but I believe I answered all of their concerns that they had. I felt they went well.
It's a good sign that they're not here, because if they were not happy, trust me, they would be here, so, because they're a very active neighborhood association. But I appreciate you taking the time and visiting with them, because I know you wanted us to vote on this last meeting, so appreciate that. And I'm in support. I wanted to make sure that the neighbors were in support before we voted, and so I'm glad that community conversation happened, and I'm satisfied if the neighbors are satisfied. So, any questions from you all? Then I think we just need a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve PC 10916.
Commissioner Clare moves to recommend to City Council approval of PC 10916. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes. The motion passes. Good luck. We're in line for item 7.
This is case number PC 10918, application to rezone 8000 South Shields Boulevard from I-1 to I-2.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dakota Desai. I'm with SRB. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. This is an application to rezone from I-1 to I-2. We did have a protest letter sent in, and the applicant did go and discuss with the residents, or the affected resident and other residents in the area to discuss the application. From my understanding, they were under the understanding that this was going to be some kind of heavier industrial use in terms of like an oil derrick or other existing uses that are over there. However, this is just for a used auto sales lot.
Yeah, and my concern on that is what it could be, not what you want to put on there.
Right.
Unfortunately.
My understanding is that it does fall within the comprehensive plan, the land use area, but also some of those heavier industrial uses would require a special permit or another form of permit or application that would require a future owner to come back here.
One thing that might help us in this, and Sarah, if you don't mind, letting us know the limitations of I-2 located directly next to R1.
Sarah Welch, Planning Department. I-2 next to a residential district requires a step down in height, landscaping, screening.
And the buffer's 25 feet, right?
The buffer in I-2 would be 25 feet and a landscape buffer. A 25-foot setback with a landscape buffer.
So right off the bat, you look like it's a much narrower portion of the site, and it would require the site-proof screening, right?
Correct.
Or do we require a SPUD on this one? Commissioner Powers is shaking her head. Thoughts on this?
Directly across from R1.
Yeah.
I can't go there.
Commissioner Noble?
It's already I-1, so the outdoor storage, does that change?
I-2 would allow outdoor storage, yes. Outdoor storage and work, whereas in I-1 it's conditional. In this case, they're requesting it for auto sales, correct? So they are unable to meet the conditions of auto sales in I-1, not because of the residential to their south, but because of the residential across Shields to the west.
Interesting. But again, if it's straight zoning, we're not limiting them to having an auto park. It can be whatever is allowed in I-2.
It could, and then the other factor that we looked at in our review is it's in an area that the comprehensive plan designates as heavy industrial.
And it front Shields for like 100 feet.
Other thoughts?
The use, I don't have a problem with. Shields is pretty much a car lot in itself.
Anyway.
I don't have an issue with their use. I just am concerned about what's going to be there potentially in the future. Some of the other uses that are allowed, I think, wouldn't be appropriate.
So it sounds like, at least there's sounds like some of us are with a SPUD on this. Would you consider
I'm
that?
curious as to how this would change anything regarding the use that we're proposing, because essentially we're still going to meet all the base zoning requirements. We've spoken with the neighbors. They understand that we're doing a used car lot. If there is a heavier industrial use in the future, then that applicant would have to come back here before the commission.
They
I mean,
that's the issue.
The only difference that, I mean, I don't work for OKC Planning.
Yeah.
The only difference that I noticed between I-1 and I-2 is some of the construction services in terms of storage. not necessarily like actual construction going on the site or manufacturing. I know there is like a custom manufacturing in there, but that's not the intent with this application. We're going to meet all the screening requirements. So, I mean, I'm not really sure what an SPUD would change in this case.
The only things that I can think of right off the bat is our ability to limit your uses to just the car lot,
Correct?
and then any additional buffers that we want to put to protect the neighbors to your north and to your south that are
Okay.
currently in use as residential. So those are the things that just right off the bat stick out to me. But I don't know what else are we thinking?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You got it?
I mean, I will note that originally, these neighbors that were affected were planning to come to this meeting. After Mr. Fisher went and spoke with them, they decided not to come because they're comfortable with his operation that currently exists, and they've known him for decades. And so my understanding is that they were comfortable with him coming before the commission and getting this approved. So I'll just add that in there as well.
Well, then another choice of yours, if you feel confident that the neighbors are in support, would be to take a recommendation of denial from us and then just let the city council, see if you can convince the council to go ahead and approve it despite us recommending denial. I think,
Why
is
would-
that where we are without a SPUD?
Yeah, probably so.
I might be the only one in favor of it with just straight I-2. If I'm understanding, being adjacent to R1 already limits some of the I-2 uses and other things. In this spot facing Shields, I'm okay with the I-2. I mean, I can just be a vote against if y'all want to deny it.
I think we're just ready to, I think we've talked about it. So why don't we just get a motion on this?
Okay. Yeah, if you don't want to switch to SPUD, that's.
Or take the continuance. You could either, it sounds like we're either going to be.
Continuance or SPUD. Well,
So
either way, it's
you
gonna be
prefer an
continuance.
SPUD?
Yes, for sure. Just, if anything, to protect that one person that's living there.
Okay. Just
So we could do the continuance. We deny it, but still get the vote by city council.
Yeah.
True.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and, I guess the move would be to withdraw this application and resubmit with a SPUD or a continuance.
Or take the continuance, maybe if the neighbors want to come in and say they understand all these implications, or, you know, or you can consider, that would still give you time to consider an SPUD. So you want to just say, take 2 weeks and think about it. If you need more time, you can ask for more time?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Commissioner Privet?
All right, I'll make a motion to continue to February 22nd.
Commissioner Privet moves to continue this item to the next meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Push my button.
The motion is seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your vote. The motion passes. We're in line for item 8.
Item 8 is SPUD 1577, application to rezone 2141 Southwest 21st Street from SPUD 110.
Is there an applicant present?
Yeah, I'm representing the Arriagas Properties, and we want to develop this in accordance to R4, and we want a spot for this, because we want to put 16 units instead of 4. And this is going to be small apartments, one-bedroom apartments, so we're going to improve the area immensely. We're going to follow the IBC on every sector that we're going to be building. We're going to have a landscaping for barriers on the east side. And also, we have plenty of room for the dumpster because we have an alley with 20 feet, so we have more than 35 feet. Those are the areas that we want to get approved.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, comments from commissioners? We have no one signed up to speak.
Dan's not here.
We'll end up with 16 units on 3 lots. Is that right?
I think it's, yeah, I was thinking it's 4. 5 lots.
So 16 units on 5 lots.
Yep. I think the consensus is 4.5, I guess, 5?
I'm okay.
You're okay with it, Commissioner Powers? Any other thoughts on this?
Just curious.
I think we're just ready for a motion, if no one has any objections. I think we originally, I know staff did some great work on this to get it a little bit more organized. I know it's a different kind of site, so appreciate you taking the time to do the SPUD, because I think this is a better outcome than it just being straight R3 zoning.
My quick question was, anything we approve on this SPUD doesn't alleviate them from having to meet code requirements, like for, they're 5 foot away from an existing 2-story building and, you know, fire rating, et cetera.
No. They'll have to meet building code. Council's telling me we have to meet building code.
Okay.
So, and we don't need to require it any further.
They'll be sprinkled.
Okay. Then I think we just need a motion, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to recommend approval, City Council, of SPUD 1577,
Commissioner,
subject to the technical evaluations.
excellent. Commissioner,
There aren't any.
oh, there aren't any. Okay. Commissioner Claire moves to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1577. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
The motion passes. Thank you. We're in line for item 11.
Item 11 is SPUD 1595, application to rezone 1107 North Purdue Avenue from R1.
Is there an applicant present? Is there an applicant present for item 11?
This one is to rezone existing R1 to an I2. That's it.
Okay, well, based on, when I initially looked at this, I panicked because of how many houses are here, but maybe Commissioner Meek, you might explain the current uses around
Yes.
this property?
I went and visited the site and visited with the support letter business, which is the Nix Lumber, who owns the majority of all the property that surrounds this rezoning application. The only concern I had was the residents to the north. When you see it, it's really a tree trimming company. So at first, I didn't understand the 0 lot line on the south, but now I understand it would be because it would be eye to eye, which is a 0. So I'm fine with the application unless any other commissioners have any comments.
Is it this whole lot that's that tree service?
Yes, all the way back.
Again, context is everything, so based on the current uses, I'm okay with it. Because the property adjacent is not being used residentially. It's being used,
Whether it's in
still zoned
conformance or not
residential.
is,
It's non-conforming, but there's no protest either.
Any other questions, commissioners? If not,
Okay.
I think we're ready.
I'd like to recommend approval to SPUD 1595.
Commissioner Meek moves to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1595. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Claire. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're in line for item 14.
Item 14 is SPUD 1581, application to rezone 408 Northwest 30th Street from R2 and HL, and also UC.
Oh, just one. Look at that crowd.
The last one. Crazy.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant who's also here with us. You will recall this application from the meeting last time. We deferred it to have additional discussions with the neighbors. We were able to have that meeting, and as well, we were able to revise the design of the project. So what is being handed out to you, I also have on large exhibit boards, and the neighbors have also been provided a copy of this. So if you'll recall, we first started this application at the Historic Preservation Commission. They provided a unanimous recommendation of approval. At the time, we were at 40 feet, 5-foot setback on the north, and 40 feet in height. Fast forward to today, we are now at 30 feet in total height. 30 feet is 5 feet less than what traditional R1 or R2 would allow, so we're below even what HP would allow in an R1 type of development. Additionally, we're now at 15 feet for a setback on the north. And why that's important is there was a lot of discussion about where we were in terms of the alignment with the structure to the west. And although when we were at 10 previously, we were in line with many of the porches that exist, we weren't in line with the buildings that also orient towards the north. So at 15 feet, we are now in line with almost everything on the 30th Street, except 2 buildings exceed the setback that we have. And importantly, we are actually set back more than historically the church experienced on 30th. So we now have a greater setback than the historic structure on that site had. As it relates to the Hudson setback, we are now at 10 feet. It is worth noting that the Hudson has an extraordinarily large right-of-way. So we're 35 feet from curb, and you'll see that in an image later. But we're 10 feet, which is greater setback than what, historically, the site experienced when it was the church. So now we have a greater setback on both the north and the east. Our building is oriented to the north. I think that's an important piece of this. So yes, we are slightly in front of the structures that exist to our south, but of course those structures orient to the east. We orient to the north. And again, there'll be a pretty good amount of green space. Perhaps the most important change is the way that you see it now. It's designed to appear to be 3 separate buildings. There is 15 feet between these 2 buildings, and although this is one building, there is a separation on the frontage of 10 feet. So from a design standpoint, it will have the appearance of 3 separate structures, which we believe is important. We believe that is more bungalow-style development, which is consistent with what you see in the area. At 30 feet in height, notably, we are now shorter than the multifamily building that exists immediately east of Hudson. Our top is 30. The building to the east of Hudson, which is an existing multifamily, is taller than 30. So we're now shorter than that. We did make a few other changes. A lot of what we talked about was density and open space. You may recall that conversation at the last Planning Commission meeting. So the zoning code defines open space. So what our architect has done, and you can see it on here, it's the first page of the packet I handed out, using the way that the code defines open space, R4 requires a minimum of 40%. We are at 63% using how the code defines it. It's important to look. One of the problems you have with the calculation of open space is, of course, you don't get to use the right-of-way. And as I mentioned, along Hudson, there is a massive amount of right-of-way. So although it's not ours to count as open space, it will be planted with trees and grass and sidewalk. That is what I think open space is really intended to do. So I think we check that box. When you look at your staff report, they detail, beginning on page 11, all of the various changes that we have made to this application since the start. You will also note that there's not a single technical evaluation. We have made some 15 or 16 changes. I have no doubt you're going to hear a lot about density when the neighbors get up. So I think it's important we look to what staff said about density on page 10. The proposal to increase density in the urban medium LUDA is in conformance with the comprehensive plan's goals to provide a mixture of residential housing types in the urban medium LUDA areas. This is exactly what the comprehensive plan is encouraging us to do with infill sites like this. Great effort has been made by my client and his team to ensure that this development is compatible. I am of the belief that the neighbors, or at least are more accepting of these designs. As you flip through the packet I've handed out, what you'll see is a development that frankly looks like it fits into either Edgemere or Jefferson Park. They look to be more bungalow. So 30 feet, 2.5 stories. The half story you may hear about, almost all residential development allows 2.5 story. That half story is important for functionality. My house is 2.5 story. We have a playroom where my kids get to enjoy. It's also important because of architecturally, you can add dormers and add interesting features that almost all historic preservation neighborhoods have. So that half story is important, but again, we're lower than the height that you would expect to see in a normal single-family neighborhood that would have a 2-story house. And again, we're less in height than what exists immediately to our east. In terms of open space and setbacks, the other thing I would add, the staff report takes a look at the analysis of the historic church that was on site. And what they say on page 9 is, the church, which existed on the lot since around 1960s, appears to have covered 75% of the parcel. So we're set back more than the church on both the north and the east, and we cover less space than the church did. So all of that, I think, is important as to why this is a compatible development. So I don't want to rehash the lengthy discussion we had. I wanted to give you those changes, show you these new images, and give you the numbers that we have. And we're happy to answer any questions, but we would urge you to support this application as we think it represents a great compromise between my client and the neighbors. All those commitments we made last time are still applicable, including the limitation of the 16 one-bedroom units. I have no doubt that Commissioner Powers, in a not-so-subtle way on the last application, was intending to highlight 16 units on 4 lots. Notably, there was no discussion whatsoever on what those 16 units would be. Here we have 20 units, 16 of which are single-bedroom units. You're also going to see a plan that was drawn from an architect that is a neighbor. Actually, she's not a neighbor. She doesn't live in either of these neighborhoods. It's important to note that the square footage that she has is actually greater than what the square footage is that we have drawn. That, with the limitation that we have on the single-bedroom units, we think what we have here is less impactful than what we could build today under the R2 zoning. The last thing I'll say is you're going to hear a lot of discussion about parking. There was a lot of discussion last time about meeting code and what that really means. The zoning code allows you to reduce your parking count by adding landscaping, adding bike racks, and doing those things. Our architect calculates that if we were to use the reductions that are available in the code, 24 parking spaces is what would be required. We have revised our document to not allow us any reductions. 30 parking spaces are what will be required with no reductions. We'll still have bike racks, but the SPUD as written would require a minimum of 30, no reductions possible. The 30 also has to be counted on site. We don't get to use on-street parking to count our 30. So 30 means 30, period. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and we'd ask for your approval.
Before we get to questions, and thank you, first thing, and I know I'm going to call on staff. I know Katie Friddle's here with Historic Preservation. Can you address, because I'd love for the neighbors to be able to respond, and they are going to get a chance to speak. I'd love for them to respond from where we are. So can you address the authority of the HP Commission with regard to the final design?
Yeah.
The specific items that will be left to their authority as written versus, what our authority is right now in the SPUD.
We do not seek to take any authority from the HP Commission. Right now, the site is zoned with an HL overlay. We retain the HL overlay in this PUD. They have full authority to hear our case and issue a CA consistent with the guidelines that exist for historic preservation. We can't turn a shovel of dirt until we have a CA from the HP Commission. We don't seek to take any authority whatsoever from the HP Commission.
So outside of the height and the setback, and I hope that Katie, Sarah, between the two of you, somebody can come and give us this verification so that our neighbors will hear what the city of Oklahoma City says about where we are on this, and I will call on Commissioner Powers, so I apologize.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. So besides the height, which would be put in the SPUD, the facade materials, which I don't even know how we're addressing that in the SPUD, the setbacks we would determine right now. Outside of that, and I guess we would enter this exhibit as with the goal of it meeting this exhibit as laid out.
Correct.
Besides that, this design would go, all of those would be the only thing that we could mandate in this SPUD, and everything else design-wise would go to the HP Commission, correct?
Correct. In fact, it's even more stringent than that. In the architecture section of the SPUD, instead of just saying it'll be X% this, X% that, we say that the architectural design will be based on and conform with styles found in Jefferson Park and Edgemere Park, and will not cause harm to the general features that define this historic district. Further, we say any new building or exterior renovations beyond ordinary maintenance and repair, as defined in Oklahoma City Municipal Code 2020, if installed, shall meet the regulations outlined within the municipal code in reference to the historic landmark overlay and shall be subject to review and approval of a certificate of appropriateness by the Historic Preservation Commission in accordance with applicable guidelines and regulations.
Okay.
Now, perhaps Ms. Friddle will disagree with something I said, but.
Commissioner Powers, I'm sorry, I just started on questions. Do you mind if we hear from them first? Do you want to make a comment? Okay. Could we talk about the HP Commission's authority? Because in my conversations with the neighbors, and I am not pretending to speak for you, you have great representation, who I know will be given plenty of an opportunity to speak, but character is not the number one, is a major concern. Yes. We would like for the design of this to be consistent with Edgemere, with Jefferson Park, with HP. And so my concern and question is the language that's in this SPUD sufficient to give the HP Commission authority to be able to act in a way that gives them the ability to make sure that this design, the final look of this design, outside of the height, the setbacks, et cetera, meets the character concerns of the neighborhood?
Yeah, I think it certainly does. I would say that the guidelines that already exist already get us there. This gets more specific to the particular neighborhoods that the property is located within. But yes, I think the combination of this language and the existing guidelines that the HP Commission would already use to review the design of a new building give them everything that the commission would need to make sure the design's compatible.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners for Ms. Friddle? Commissioner Powers, sorry, I stole the mic. Okay.
There's one point when we're talking about design. There was a commitment made that dormers would be limited to the Hudson
East and west.
frontage. East and west, that's right. So, I mean, other than that, there wasn't too much discussion about design, other than I kind of like bungalow style development. I like that label, but that they would be, that really is the purview of the HP Commission. I think our concern is not so much to empower them, they're already as empowered as they need to be, but simply to prevent any inference that we've decided something that we think they need to follow our lead on this, so. But I'd like to hear from the neighbors.
Okay. All right, first we have Ken Chancellor. Do you want to address the commission, or are we going to give? Okay. And please give us your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes to address the commission.
Ken Chancellor, 3703 North McKinley Avenue. And I'm in the Putnam Heights Historic District, and wanted to go on record as we took a vote and are against this proposal.
Okay.
Because if you grant this one, you guarantee you'll get another one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Eric Groves.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I represent the White family who resides on North Harvey Parkway, Mr. and Mrs. William White, who are opposed to this application. Any application like this has to be subjected to a series of governing rules, and those include the following. The PUD statute, which allows zoning by PUDs and SPUDs in the first place, the PUD and SPUD ordinance of the city, the comprehensive plan, the HP ordinance, and then the HP standards and guidelines, with particular reference to Section 4 of those guidelines, which covers new construction. This proposal does not comply with any of those rules in one respect or another. There is a lack of compatibility, and SPUDs are required to provide for compatibility with a new project and its surroundings. It doesn't exist here. That's not to say that there are not apartments in Jefferson Park. There are, but not like this. It does not minimize adverse effects on Jefferson Park or Edgemere, although SPUD law requires it to. In the comprehensive plan, there's a lack of compliance because this differs in material respects from adjacent properties in terms of height and lot coverage. And the HP ordinance requires harmony between a new project and the existing neighborhood. That's not here. HP guidelines on their new construction, Section 4, 4.2.5, requires a match with existing architecture. We don't see that. I didn't see the sketches that Mr. Box provided until this morning, but even at a glance, they bear no aesthetic relationship to what's already there in Jefferson Park, much less Edgemere. At 4.2.6, there must be a relationship between the new project and the height of the buildings next door or close by. It's not there. They're little bungalows. And this is a two-story building or 2.5-story building as they've proposed it. The SPUD law in our city says that it may not be used to circumvent other policies of the city. Well, our HP ordinance and our HP guidelines are policies. And what we're asking the commission to do simply is enforce them. Not allow a SPUD to come in and circumvent those policies, but that's what will happen here if this is approved. The bottom line is that my clients, and whose position is congruent with the neighborhood, we're not opposed to infill development. We're not opposed to multifamily. We welcome new people to our neighborhoods, but we are opposed to projects that do not comply with existing law. The city has established a public policy of preservation, of historic preservation, and all we insist on is that this project comply with that policy, which it does not as presently designed, unfortunately. That's not to say that it can't be redesigned, but I don't regard the concessions made by the developer as sufficient to meet the standards set by the city. So we have to ask that you deny it and hope that you will. Thanks so much for your attention.
Eric, I've got to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Because I know you know this, the code and all of these issues and dealt with them more than me, certainly. I hope that you have heard our best effort to try, as far as you're concerned about the architectural elements. I hope you've heard our best effort to ensure that the HP Commission has the authority to make those ultimate design concerns outside of the very specific items such as height, setback, parking requirements, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that language? And if it's not sufficient to you, why?
The way I regard it is that this commission has the duty to see that the architecture is compatible with the existing area. And what's been submitted to you obviously is not. I think the HP Commission's duty is to apply the guidelines in greater detail. They're going to have to go back to the HP Commission, of course, and we'll see them there. And that is where I think that is the forum to hammer out the details in terms of the facade and other architectural touches that that render the project more compatible with Jefferson Park. But in a SPUD or a PUD, everything's on the table. Everything's negotiable. I think this commission has the power to review everything associated with this project. But this project is distinct, you see, because there's overlay or infill development all over town, and it's a good thing. And this applicant is doing some of it. But this case is distinct because in neighborhoods such as north of Crown Heights, where a lot of it's going on, all you need is a building permit. And if you have R1 zoning, you get R2 zoning, go ahead. But this overlay district makes this distinctive. And it adds another layer of regulation. And they just are not there yet. Not to say that they can't get there, but they're not there yet. And because they're not there, we have to ask you to deny it.
Okay, so I guess I'm wanting to make sure that I've heard you completely, and I don't know that I'm completely following at this point. I'm wanting to understand because you're saying you'd like the commission to make the final decision on architectural elements, and I'm not sure that I agree on, you and I agree on where the line is of where the Planning Commission's authority should end as far as those design decisions, and where the HP Commission's authority should begin. And so my goal in all of this questioning is to make sure, I think we lack the knowledge and skill, frankly, to be the ones who make this real decision. And I serve on an HP Commission for the Capital Medical Zoning Commission. And I can tell you that the way that we analyze those things is much more specific and much more closely aligned. And so our goal is to give the HP Commission, ensure that they have the right authority to make these more detailed decisions that will align this final design with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm just wanting to understand where you're seeing the language that we have in the SPUD is not going to get us there with the goal that I just named.
There's no fine line, Commissioner. It's a good question and it's a hard question. And this case fairly presents that question. There is no bright line distinction that I can give you. All I can give you is common sense. You are a zoning body, a recommending zoning body. So, and this is a SPUD, that's a negotiated zoning district, a standalone, independent snowflake district. It's not like any others. So you have to handle it like any other SPUD. But it's distinctive because there's an overlay district on it. So to some greater or lesser extent, you have to apply the rules of the overlay district as well. Now, my instinct tells me that if there's some fine details that need to be worked out, I think that's where the HP Commission comes in. But our ordinance structure is not such to make a fine line distinction, Commissioner, and maybe that's something we should take up in the future as to where your authority ends and where HP's begins. You know, I don't have an easy answer for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Next, we have Samuel Day.
It's been a while since I've been here. I'm Samuel Day. I live at 1620 Northwest 17th Street. I'm an architect and local infill developer, and I'm here partly to speak in support of the project, but also saying that I think some of the concessions they made don't render this high enough land use, really. So I'm here on behalf of not the neighborhood, but the public. I'm here on behalf of young people who can't afford to buy a house and want a place that they can rent within walking distance of bars and restaurants and their jobs. You know, Oklahoma City has designated 4% of our residential land use area for things other than R1. That means I need a 5,000 square foot lot to build a house in 96% of the city. And there's only 4% of it where I can build a duplex even. And I'm here on behalf of the schools who have seen their their enrollment dwindling and have seen property taxes declining in these areas. We've seen Edgemere close on behalf of neighborhood protests like this. We've seen Gatewood close on behalf of it as the populations of these neighborhoods decline because household size is going down, and these rich neighborhoods will not allow any more infill in their neighborhood, any multifamily at all. I want to contradict Mr. White's point here that this project is special. It's not. It's the same as the Linwood project that was the 3-unit project that Nathan Cowell had a few years ago that was denied because a bunch of people showed up. It's the same as the project this developer is doing in Crown Heights that's been denied because a bunch of people showed up. It's the same as the project in Helms Farm that's denied because a bunch of people show up. I want to read from the Neighborhood Association letter that was sent out that says the call to action for everyone to show up, and everyone to write in and protest departments. It says here, right, it asks everyone to send official letters and turn out. It says large turnouts at these meetings have proven to be the single most impactful way to influence the commission. We saw recently, right here, the one on Southwest 21st, more density, flies through, no protests. It's a poor neighborhood. It's a less organized neighborhood. People don't show up. People show up, the council time and time again bends backwards, or the commission does, in deference to the rich, organized neighborhood and acts against the interests of the public, against the half of Oklahoma City residents that rent, against small local businesses that depend on people living within walking distance, against the county that depends on the collection of property taxes, and the city that depends on the collection of sales taxes. We deny these units. We ask for more people living further away, more driving, more and less property tax collection. I also want to say that I agree with what Kamal's saying. It's pretty clear that the commission is not a design review board. It's a land use board. It determines land use decisions, not individual design decisions. It's really impossible for us to determine, go through every time someone wants to build a fourplex and make land use decisions here. And we've seen before where developers have come in, showed renderings, and then, it changes, and the neighborhood's up in arms. We're unsure on how to enforce it at Development Services. Development Services is not equipped to enforce renderings. Specifically, I also want to point out that 30 feet for 3 floors, that ends up with 8-foot ceilings for all the units, which is really cramming these residents. This building isn't casting shadow on anyone. It's on the south side of Northwest 30th, so it just casts a shadow into the street. I think the 30-foot height restriction is inappropriate. I think the parking ratios of over 1.5 per bedroom is way too much in an urban neighborhood like this. And I also think that it becomes more of a nuisance for the neighbors, especially to the south, to have a larger parking lot. I think by the zoning, this lot is gross 3/4 of an acre. So with our land use, the density allowed is 10 to 40 units an acre. At 3/4 of an acre, the maximum density set for this parcel should be 29 units, which I think is completely appropriate at an urban infill site like this. So if we have questions, I'd love to take them. I imagine Janice might have, no?
I think I'll hold my tongue.
Okay.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you. All right, next we have Lindsay Peever.
Good afternoon. So if you are here to support the neighborhoods in their negotiations with the developer for the SPUD, please stand. Thank you. So since we've been here before, I will save you a lot of what you've already heard. But I do want to open with a few comments about the process. While we are here to speak about this particular project, you have likely seen that its implications go far beyond just the number on this spud. You received a letter probably today or yesterday signed by each of the presidents of the HP neighborhoods because this spud is very concerning to them. I understand that SPUDs and PUDs have come to allow people to customize their own zoning, although that is not why they were created. But the ability to customize one's own zoning in an HP district creates an inequitable two-tiered system. All HP dwellers must adhere strictly to the guidelines. Driveways and windows are forcibly torn out sometimes due to mistakes, but developers can come in and craft their own zoning right next door. So I do want to note that 101 pages of community objections were submitted out of your 345-page document. The packet, that's almost 30% of the whole packet, taken up with people from the community who have taken a moment to voice their objections for this one case. So as I promised last time, we've worked in good faith and really diligently with the developers to come closer together. And as Mr. Box has illustrated earlier, we are closer together. We wanted to make it as easy on you as possible, so we created a chart where we are still divergent in what we hope to achieve. I do want to just note a few things that were said. The church, while it was there for a number of decades, was built subject to a variance, so we don't really think those setbacks should be measured against. And we do have the Sanborn maps if anyone's interested in those. Okay, we're going to pass out the chart so you all have that right in front of you. Okay. The chart illustrates a solid counter-proposal and a lot of negotiation. I really think we all believed that we would be somewhere closer to an agreement today, but we are here before you again and we're not quite there. However, no one is really happy, no one is celebrating, and I think that's a good sign that we're getting pretty close. One thing we have not been able to reach agreement on, as you heard before, is density. The way this is currently zoned, 6 dwelling units on these 3 lots by right is what should be there. That would include open space, which you lack in these larger buildings. And then even if each of those 3 dwelling units had a garage apartment, then you're up to 9. And then even if which is more difficult to get through in HP, but even if you added each of these 3 units to have an ADU, then we're now up to 12. So 12 units if they had just followed the code. The other thing that you all were discussing with Mr. Groves that I wanted to circle back to is the setbacks. And the only way we can empower the HP Commission to make sure that this project is built in an appropriate way is to ensure that they begin with the appropriate setbacks. And so if this passes today just how it is, the setbacks are wrong. In historic preservation, the setbacks should follow what is already in the built environment. And as you see, we have that on our chart, where we are and where they are. Where we are is actually having gone out and measured and surveyed, and those are the actual setbacks surrounding this proposed development. We have also asked for 16, even though I just went through with you that it would be 12. So we, again, feel like 16 is, even more, it shows that we're trying to meet them somewhere in the middle. So the setbacks and the height, HP doesn't allow for, 3 stories or 2.5 stories. And so if they could meet us at 16 units with those setbacks there but in front of you, and you know, my copy was given to you, so I won't read it to you, but if you have questions on those, I would be glad to go through those and answer any questions you have.
Yep, I think my first question is, one, let me say this, thank you for the effort that's been made. I don't want us to lose sight. So often in these are hard issues. What happens at someone's home, in their neighborhood, is deeply personal. And so I appreciate the effort that's been made to try to get to a consensus, and I know it's challenging. So bear with us while we today try to do our best, which is never perfect despite our best effort, to try to get to a good conclusion here. First, let's talk about the setback. I'm looking at this chart on the setback that the attorney for the applicant submitted. It looks like this is it's showing the porches nearby. Is your point that you want it to move back just a little bit further so that it's in line with that, even though it's oriented to Hudson?
Yes, just to match the setbacks that are there. That is exactly how we laid that out.
Okay.
Existing setbacks. So if I recall their design, the parking lot goes into the
Part of it.
setbacks. Yeah.
Okay. And obviously that's to meet the 30 parking lot minimum that I thought the neighbors wanted too.
I
right?
think the neighbors wanted them to follow the parking code, which they initially agreed to, but I think people didn't understand there was a percentage deduction that would have gotten them far below. So 30 is a negotiation point where they, you know, I don't know, does 30 include ADA parking? If not, then it's probably 28 spaces plus, right, so then 28 spaces with ADA. Yeah, we'll never be on the same page with parking, and so they agreed to 30 without deductions, and I think we agreed to call that a day.
Okay. So naturally you understand that if we stick to that, that is going to create some problems with the physical amount of space to place parking lots in buildings.
Yes.
So I think that one of the questions then is conceding some of the space in the setback off Hudson, appropriate in order to accommodate having more parking spaces?
Yep, and part of that question could be answered if they would just agree to 16 units.
Okay, but you'd still want the 30 parking spaces even if they went to 16 units, right?
Yes.
So see, I don't know that's the concern is I don't know how we can do both.
I think the setback is more a concern with respect to the actual building than
To the
parking.
building, not necessarily the lot. Okay. Is that accurate
Yes.
for you? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Then my next question is about the language regarding the authority of the HP Commission. I hope I've been as clear as I possibly can be. We don't want the authority to make the final decision about what it actually looks like. We just want to give the general parameters so that there's a minimum standard that the applicant has to adhere to, and then you all and the HP Commission would get to work out the very detailed specifics.
I agree with that completely. We don't
Okay.
want to task you with that. They've agreed to a charrette, and we know that we have a lot of work still ahead. I was just suggesting that if it's going to, you know, live within the HP guidelines, then the setbacks are wrong, and they'll be wrong in the SPUD if it gets passed the way it is right now.
With the setback.
Correct.
Okay. Then let's talk about the half-story. The argument, as I understand it, from the applicant is that the additional half-story will add value from an architectural standpoint. Your thoughts on that?
What I've put before you is what has, you know, come from dozens of people, you know, giving and taking, and so that's just where we are.
So
It's a 2-foot difference from what I understand, and there were arguments about whether it be to the ridge line, and that is all over my head. I'm not an architect. So 28 feet to the ridge line is our ask, and 30 feet is currently what the SPUD would allow them to do.
Okay. That's tough. Go ahead, Commissioner Powers.
Going to leap here. You know, I think that really where we are in this negotiation, and I have to give credit where it's due, and to both sides, that, you know, there's been a lot of negotiation. There's been a lot of back and forth. It's a little easier for the developer to reach consensus than it is for a couple of neighborhoods to reach consensus. The one thing that has been a sticking point from the very beginning, and in my view remains the sticking point today, is the density. And in terms of all these other issues of design and setbacks and parking and all of those things, they all swum around it, and they were chipped away in the effort to reach consensus. And I think even though, and I want to be fair, I don't mean to dismiss this chart, any part of it. But I think the reason that the 16 units total is at the top of the list is because it's at the top of the list. I think that is the one thing that remains. It affects virtually everything else. It will affect what it looks like when it's done. It'll affect how much space there is. It'll affect everything. And they've agreed to setbacks. They've agreed to various things that are all going to get built into the SPUD. Whether they actually use them or not, I'm sure it's going to have some dependency on that number of units. This is not an area, this is an area of Oklahoma City that is already dense. These are not single-family lots. They're duplex lots. If what was built on them matched the historical platting and zoning of them, there would be 6 units there. If they each had an ADU, there would be 9 units there. If they each had 2 duplex units on them, there would be 12 units there. That's dense. But the neighborhood's counterproposal was not the 12, it was 16, which I thought was very generous and would probably have eliminated the need for all of this discussion. So I think that's a hard number. I think it is, you know, the neighbors have worked really, really hard. There's a lot of eye rolling about rich people and HP, and I think the people who lived in this city before we had those designations and saw what those neighborhoods had turned into and what they would have likely turned into if they hadn't had the help of those ordinances to save them and to induce investment in those neighborhoods. It's scary to think about now. But they're there, and yes, democracy in action means that people who are interested in a topic get to come down to City Hall and voice their opinion. It's unfortunately messy and time-consuming, but it's the way it works. And I don't think it's appropriate to just dismiss their concerns as, you know, trying to keep the riffraff out. There's no question that this lot is not going to be, that these lots are not going to be developed R1. They were never designated as that, and nobody's asking for that. So I think when people care about things, they put in the time and effort. That time and effort's been put in here. To keep going back to what the church was is really to deny kind of the reality. Churches get built wherever they get built, and they always have. And they're not really what you look back to once they're gone and you're developing that piece of property. What would have been built here and, you know, what would have been designated on the Sanborn maps, as you see here, were duplexes. They were, you know, in accordance with the zoning that they had. So I think it's a bit of a false equivalent, you know, to talk about greater density like there's not already greater density here. What we're talking about is what level of density is appropriate. And yes, it is a bit odd to me that in an area that doesn't have any HP or HL, we were putting 16 units on 5 lots, and there's all this uproar about narrowing 16 on 3 lots here, which does have HP protection, HL protection. So,
Can I say something about the density? And what we went and talked about 2 weeks ago was the single bedroom apartments against 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments. So to me, the density is more about how many people will be on the property than just the dwelling unit itself.
okay.
So if you do that math, it's really not that dense.
There are a lot of single bedroom duplexes in Crestwood and south of Crestwood, whatever it is, south of Crestwood. So
Miller,
even
is that Miller?
Miller, maybe, yes.
Yeah.
And so, the designation of, the zoning doesn't account for that. I can't rewrite the ordinance. I think that the units, as they have agreed, they want to reduce the number of single bedrooms down to 14 or whatever to preserve the opportunity to build some of these out as more than one bedroom things, then yeah, I think that's appropriate if they're reducing the density, so.
But are they reducing the density? That's what I don't really understand here. If there's 16 2-bedroom, you have 32 people live in there.
I didn't say 16 2-bedrooms.
Well, you said you were okay with 16 dwelling units. I'm just saying if he made it 16 2-bedroom.
I would not be okay with that. It's too dense. They've agreed to what they've agreed to in terms of limiting the number of
and this is a
one
spud.
bedrooms.
It's a spud so that we can get into the details. And that's just where I'm trying to get into the details of how many people are going to live there, more than just the number of units.
Well, we can't write that into the spud, how many people are going to live there.
But they have.
We don't have a
We
way to
can
do
limit the
that.
number of bedrooms,
That's right.
which is more precise, and that's Commissioner Noble's point. I think is
Yeah.
it's more precise to say bedrooms than it is, and that's not even controlling because you could live in a 2-bedroom place and be a single person too. But okay.
I think, there's been an awful lot of, and you got in your packet, letters from other HP neighborhoods, and I think the HP neighborhoods are feeling very much sort of under assault. This push to increase density in the core, which I think everybody agrees with, is a good idea, but it has to be done, nonetheless, in a way that is consistent with these areas. And this is one of those areas.
Trying to find the point of compromise here, so I'm going to go back to the height and how important this sticking point is over the half story.
Yeah, so I would just say, an HP district is different than everywhere else in the city. This could be built anywhere, but it's being built in HP, and so these asks were crafted based on, please follow the rules we have to follow. And so that's why it says 16 total units with 14 1-bedroom units, because there's a lot of arguments for density that are based on low-income developments. That is not this. No one has said that. This is not going to be a lower-income place to live. The chance that couples or roommates will have to live in 1-bedrooms, that there's that chance, to what your point was.
Yeah.
We don't know how many people will live there, but if it's expensive, then more people will have to live there to make the rent work. So the asks are really based on, please follow the same rules we have to follow.
So just, Katie, if you don't mind coming to the microphone, please. Okay. So so we're at 28 feet versus 30. What would the HP guidelines say?
So HP says the height of these are in the guidelines. The height of new buildings should relate to the height, roof form, and cornice line of adjacent structures and to those of other buildings on the streetscape. The height of new buildings should conform to the following unless historical development patterns are documented otherwise. In streetscapes with uniform building heights, new buildings should match this height. For example, on a streetscape of all one-story residential structures, any new building should also be one-story in height. In streetscapes with varying building heights, the height of new buildings should align with the existing buildings on the streetscape, with particular attention paid to the predominant height of the adjacent structures and other structures on the streetscape.
My understanding is that directly across the street from Hudson is a multifamily building that is taller than 30 feet. Is that true?
I don't know the exact height of the building across the street. It sits up on a hill, and it is 2 stories, 2.5 stories. I don't know the measurement of the height of the building.
So then what's the analysis then? There's obviously a single-family one-story house that's on one side, and then on the other side, across the street, there's a multifamily building that we're assuming is consistent with, R1, which would generally be, 35 feet and 2.5 stories.
Yeah, so HP would look at the surrounding buildings, usually we were going to ask an architect to do a streetscape, comparing the heights of the adjacent structures to the proposed structure, and then we're going to expect them to make their case for why, in this case, on this site, is it appropriate for the building to be taller than what's next to it, if that is the predominant height along the block.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
There was a study done by Mr. White, and I don't know if Mr. Groves could speak to it, but there were pretty extensive studies done as to the number of multifamily units and the heights of those. It didn't make it into your packet, I know, but it was sent to you separately. It got missed
Okay.
on accident.
I don't think I've seen that one. Okay. It seems like if we're arguing over 2 feet,
I hear ya.
so I'm trying to figure out how to get there. Should we just say 29 feet and leave it?
I was hoping to have the chance to just ask the developer if they'll please give us 2 feet, if they'll please give us 5 feet on the setback, and if they'll please just go down by 4 units.
Okay. Commissioners, thoughts?
I've heard Mr. Groves say that they don't have a problem with multifamily. I believe if anything on this lot, 16 units or 20 units, if it's 2-story, I think with the width of this property and the size of this property, that trying to limit in today's building environment where most ceilings aren't 8 foot anymore, when you put a 2-story, 9-foot upper and lower floors with truss, and then you set rafters and you're trying to limit them to the 28 foot, it's going to severely reduce the roof slope. Commissioner Newman can probably speak to that also. I think of all of the issues there, arguing over 28 versus 30 is the least of the problems that I see.
Okay. Suppose we were to require that the east setback be consistent with the setbacks along Hudson, and allow the HP Commission to decide where that line is, because I'm sure we could calculate it based on porches or not. And then we were to require the 28 feet and a maximum height of 2 stories. And then we were to limit the minimum number of 1-bedrooms down to 10. That would mean that the building itself and the setbacks of the building will be consistent with the neighborhood. The architectural character of the buildings will be consistent with the neighborhood, but it concedes some of the density to the developer. Not all of it, because we'd be in a maximum unit of 16. So character is respected, which has been a top priority of mine. I live in a historic neighborhood in Oklahoma City, so I understand that. So if we were able to get there, could we concede some units?
How many have they conceived already? Was there 40 originally, David? Or
27.
27, and we're down to 16 or
20.
20 now?
20.
Commissioners?
My thoughts are the developer has conceded enough as the application, and I'm in favor of it as it is. 30-foot, 16 or 20 units. Again, even what Commissioner Meek said, you take it to 28, you're just shrinking the box these people would live in.
I personally would take that deal.
The proposal I made?
Yeah.
Other thoughts, commissioners? And to the applicant's shaking his head no.
No, I mean, to Commissioner Noble's point, we have negotiated down a tremendous amount. We were at 40 feet, now we're at 30 feet. We were at 27 units, now we're at 20 units with more definition as to what those 20 units are. We're at 5 feet setback on the north, now we're at 15. We were at 3 stories with a single building. Now we're at the visual, a 3-building bungalow style. We believe that we have conceded enough, as is. And this idea that HP feels under assault, respectfully, I live in Heritage Hills. Most of my social network is in Heritage Hills. I can tell you no one that I know feels under assault because of an infill development at 30th and Hudson. HP neighborhoods have a tendency to come out of the woodwork because it's, one for all type of mentality. So anytime there's a change happening, they all come together. An individual from Putnam Heights, which is west of Classen, was here. Like, we have to meet the guidelines. HP Commission is ultimately going to force us to meet the guidelines. That's how they're not under attack, is that the HP Commission still has authority and control over the design of this project.
But with all your concessions, you still don't meet the guidelines. That's the problem.
Well, we don't know because it's not designed. The HP Commission will tell us if we do or don't meet the guidelines. This body is not set up to say whether someone does or doesn't meet the historic preservation guidelines. Only the HP Commission can do that. We tell you in our SPUD, we have to meet the guidelines. So, HP Commission, once there's a full design in front of them, will tell us we either do or don't. Ms. Frettel and her staff will make a detailed analysis whenever an application comes in for a CA. That's when we'll know whether we do or don't meet the guidelines. If we don't meet the guidelines, I can tell you what typically happens at HP Commission is you're either continued or you're denied.
The fear, though, and I think you understand this, is for example, if we decided that we're going to let the HP Commission decide on the final decision on height, we're going to let them decide on the number of whether it's 2.5 stories or not, consistent with the guidelines, and just say that we want them to make that final call. The concern from the neighbors, and I think it's very reasonable, is can they rely on how much protection will they have from the HP Commission versus what we could offer them now from the Planning Commission. And so that's where I'm trying to figure out how to get there so that there can be comfort in knowing that when they get to the HP Commission, they're going to have full authority. Because even with this, to me, as someone who doesn't live in the neighborhood, again, it seems like a very slight difference. And I want the design to look good. So I'd be perfectly fine saying this last 2 feet or half story gets decided by the HP Commission once they see a final design. I'm perfectly fine with that. But I want the neighbors to have assurances that suddenly the design's not going to be 40 feet if we send it back to HP Commission.
Right. Well, so the half story doesn't add height, right? The height is set at a max of 30. The half story adds dormers and architectural intrigue. It doesn't add any height.
Adds massing.
It adds gables.
Yeah.
I think, it's easy enough to state what all the developer believes he has given up in this process. But to look at it the other way, the neighbors started off with 3 duplex lots. So, they've come just as far, if not farther, I think, than the developer has in the negotiation process. And this is not really a contest in that way. I think what we're here to decide is not who's given up the most or who's given up enough, but what is an appropriate use for this piece of property? And that includes the density.
Okay. Thoughts on the setback? If we match the setback on Hudson, can we at least get there?
Does anybody know the existing right-of-way width of Hudson?
It's 70 feet,
70? That's pretty,
I believe it is. They're quite wide, both, I
Yeah,
think
that's pretty
both
wide.
30th and Hudson, if I recall correctly. Marilyn's not here.
I don't have a drafting table here, but with the current site plan that the applicant has passed out to everybody on Hudson, if you line a straight line up with the porch that's to the south, this proposal is set back further than the front of that porch. Do you disagree with that?
I don't have that right in front of me, but I
He
know
has it on a
that
big board.
we, the reason for the numbered setback on your chart is that in historic preservation, they don't let you set back to the porch, they make you set back to the actual structure. In fact, they even make people remove some of their porch if it were built outside of guidelines. So that's the reason for that.
But of course, that deals with orientation, right? So we're oriented to the north. If we were oriented to the east, then yes, we potentially have a setback problem. But that's the side of our building. Right. So that's not how the orientation deals with, whereas the homes to our south are oriented east. It's apples and oranges at that point.
what's the subdivision plat call for?
Oh,
Do we know?
Who knows? That plat is going to be
It's going to be an old one.
100 years old.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
100
Anybody
years
know?
old because it's an historic district, David.
So I asked the architect, the issue becomes to meet that setback on Hudson, it pushes it back to one building. We lose the ability to have that feel of multiple buildings. That's the issue. We think the multiple buildings for a couple of feet that you're really not going to be able to tell the difference is important for the functionality of the building to feel and look like traditional bungalow style development in this neighborhood.
That's why I said that in this process of the back and forth, you know, things have been given and taken away and give and get and so on. I myself am not as concerned about the setback along Hudson because I think it does affect how many buildings there could be and what they'll end up looking like. I think that's more important. I think maintaining the orientation on toward 30th is more important. The dormers on limited to Hudson, that's more important. Where we are is at the density. That's what we're here to decide.
Okay. Lindsay?
I'll make a comment. It may not help get us there or not. Interestingly, agree with just about everybody. I do think we're really close, and I agree with what Janice is saying. It's down to the density. The 20 seemed like a lot to me on this size. I think the 40, somebody was remembering, that was like the per acre, I think. So we're down to 20 units. I still think it's precedent. It's unique to me. We haven't dealt with it a lot, this limitation to one bedroom. That's what allows me to get comfortable with the 20. Now, to frame that up a little bit more, I think I said last time too, it is partly because this is not just a corner lot. It is because was a church for a long time. The neighbors came to know it as at least a former church. I'm glad we're not talking about traffic. I don't think we should be talking about a lot of that stuff because this is a unique spot in this neighborhood. It was a church for a long time. It will be more dense than if it was just a corner lot with a house on it. So we've come all this way. I hate that maybe both sides wouldn't be happy, but I think down to 20 was, 16 to 20 is the last thing I had in my concern. Limiting it to the one bedroom makes me comfortable with the 20 units. That's where I am.
So when you say that, what are you saying? You're saying all 20 units need to be one bedroom?
No,
You're saying
sorry,
the
they did
16
enough of them. The fact that they limited almost all the 20, the 16 of them were limited to one bedroom. If they were just saying 20 units regardless of bedroom, it would be too much. But that, that offer of limiting 16 of them to one bedroom is what gets me there.
Commissioner Powers, thoughts on it?
I'd like to hear from the other commissioners. I mean, everybody knows what I think, so.
I feel like with the 20 and the limiting to one bedrooms, that the 30 parking meets the calculations that follow that requirement to meet Oklahoma City parking requirements.
You're saying that it's sufficient to have, that with the 20 units, you're saying, and the requirement that there be at least 30 parking spaces is sufficient?
That are all off-street meets the requirement.
Okay.
I personally think that's too many parking spaces, but, here we are. In this area specifically, Paseo, a lot of people walk, ride bikes, it's a really walkable neighborhood.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, when I saw the latest site plan, I was like, that looks like Walmart's parking lot. I understand the push for parking off-street, but at the same time, I kind of almost feel like it created another issue. But to me, I think limiting the number of bedrooms versus just having whatever number of units. I mean, we're down to the bedroom unit talk. It persuades me more to support it with the single bedrooms versus not having that defined. I know you guys talked about 16 units. Was that 16 units still contingent upon a certain amount of single bedrooms?
Yeah, it was 16 units with 14 one-bedrooms.
Okay.
And I'm hearing you all, so what I would ask is if 20 units is what you end up deciding on, this says 16, they would agree to 16 one-beds and up to 4 bedroom units for the other 4, and we would just ask, could those be limited to 2 bedrooms if 20 is where you end up?
That's already in the SPUD, that the other 4 have a max of 2 bedroom.
That's why the parking calculations work out that I ran. It exceeds them.
So you're saying, just so I'm clear, you're saying do 16, that the 16 singles, 4, but the remaining 4 would be limited to no more than 2?
Just to be clear, I'm saying 16 units,
Okay,
14
sorry.
one-bedrooms, but, yeah, I just didn't want, but I hear you all leaning a lot closer to 20, and I just didn't want those other 4 non-one-bedroom units to be 3 or 4 bedroom units.
Okay.
Let me ask this. We're talking 16 and 20. Is anyone open to 18?
We need the 20.
Yes, okay. 18.
Again, and that's already in the SPUD, though. It's 16 one-bed, 4 max 2-bed. And perhaps they end up being 1 bedroom, but there could be no more than 4 2-bedroom units.
Then if we were to go with that proposal, I mean, of the 20 units, 16 one-bedroom, and then limiting the rest to no more than 2 bedrooms, then perhaps we could also say that the building height will be consistent with the HP guidelines and no more than 30 feet, so that it gives the design discretion to the HP Commission to say if they like 26 feet and that's consistent, they can go ahead and do it. We could do the same thing for the number of stories and say consistent with the HP guidelines and no more than 2.5. So that way you could look at the design and say it has to follow the guidelines and just can't be more than 2.5 stories. What do you think about that? It would give the HP Commission the authority to decide ultimately. So they could end up deciding, and this is to the developer's detriment perhaps, they could say it all has to be 1 story. I don't know, but.
Doesn't the application already say that, though?
Yes. I mean, it already says subject to. We're setting a max height but we're also saying it's subject to review and approval by HP Commission. So we're happy with that, and we agree to that it's no more than 30, subject to the review of the HP Commission.
But then you'll go to the HP Commission and tell them, well, planning said I can have 30.
Well, and they're going to say, but our guidelines tell us this. But whatever you said, we're fine with. We just think it already says that.
Yeah, so far what you guys have said is their side of the chart.
I guess I just want to still make sure that the design is something you'll like. And if the design is something, if the dormers and gables are attractive, even if it's 30 feet versus 28, and it still looks good and it's consistent with the neighborhood, why wouldn't we give HP Commission the authority to do that? That's my worry, is if it looks good and everybody's happy with the look, then is that a problem?
No, I mean, we're still on, just some squishy guidelines is the problem. And we saw when we went through HP the first time that they did not stay within their own guidelines for this. So that's why we are here asking you all to make these sorts of decisions.
That's a whole nother issue.
Well, in respect to that, HP Commission has guidelines when they're reviewing a design of a building. So to say that they failed at their job and they didn't apply the guidelines is just simply not true, because there was no design before them to apply their guidelines to. That will come after Adam designs a final product. Then they will employ the guidelines as exist for Oklahoma City.
But no one's talking about the design yet. We're talking about setbacks, height, density, right? So that's not design in terms of, they use the wrong facade material or the wrong, the dormers stick out too far. That's not where we are.
We're just setting a max.
I do want to make the point, I guess, that this idea that, the limitation of some of these units to one bedrooms is a huge concession point. It's just simply not true. This is their business model. So what they're conceding is what they want to build. It's not like, we could do 3 or 4 bedrooms and that'd be great, because they don't want to build 3 or 4 bedrooms. They want to build 1-bedroom units predominantly. It may all end up being 1-bedroom units if that's what the market wants. So it's not a huge concession point, is my only point. I'm going to stop talking now.
So it's their business model because that's what the market demands. The city spent a significant amount of money on the housing and affordability study. The biggest thing we lack are single-bedroom units. So yes, it's their business model, but that's because our city is woefully lacking in those units in the core.
Not in Jefferson Park. It is a very dense neighborhood.
Trying to get to the best place that allows us to move forward in a healthy way. And perhaps we just need to just go ahead and see where we are. And maybe that's the best thing. Thoughts?
I would defer to Janice if she wanted to make a motion to deny, but if she'd rather not go through that, I'd make the motion to approve. I'm just afraid I wouldn't get it precisely right, but I can try if we're ready for that. It'll be subject to some things.
I don't hear a second, so.
I was checking with you first.
And I appreciate that.
Well,
So
we'll see if I get a second. I was checking with you first. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve, subject to maybe nothing. I don't think there were any technical evaluations.
We do need to add one. Require that if dormers are used, they're only allowed on the east and west elevation.
Only allowed on east and west. Okay. And sorry, a bit of commentary in here during my motion, but to the point of your chart, and you said we're going with his chart, there's also, I have a column on the right, which is all the concessions. So yes, I believe was the current SPUD language column in yours, is that the applicant's current proposal today? So this 20 units consisting of 16 1-bedroom, 4 2-bedroom, 30-foot, 2.5, all this, is that already in the SPUD today? So I can just make a motion for that.
Can I, wait a second, sorry.
Yeah.
Setback.
That's what I was wondering.
Do we want to address that and say that we would like it to at least be consistent with the rest of Hudson?
If we move the setback to the west, it becomes a single building, is the problem. Again, that right-of-way on Hudson is massively wide. As designed, we are 35 feet from the curb.
So what I thought I'd understood all that, the reason I was going to move forward with the way I see it read here is I believe the attempts to increase the setback further was really just to try to make the footprint smaller, to allow less units. I think it was down to being appropriate. So I'm going to make a motion for the SPUD as it was presented today, subject to one technical evaluation. If the dormers are used, they're only allowed on the east and the west. If that works, that's my motion.
Okay, Commissioner LaForge moves to recommend to City Council approval of SPUD 1581, subject to the amended technical evaluation, limiting dormers to only the east and west elevation. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes, if we can.
Thank you.
And the motion passes. What I will say is that the process will continue, and I would strongly encourage that the developer, because we know it's going to City Council, and this whole conversation is going to be renewed about what changes are required. I think it would be to your benefit to continue to have discussions and continue to refine the design so that our neighbors can be more and more assured that the final output is going to be closer in matching with the character of the existing neighborhood. And so the conversation's not over, it's still going to continue. I think conversations between both sides should continue so that we can get closer and closer to it matching. So that's, and I'm happy to be a part of those discussions if that's helpful at all. So that concludes our items requiring a separate vote. We're now in line for additional items. Are there any additional items? Then we're on to communications and reports, Planning Commission committees. Are there any committee reports? And I know we need to nominate and affirm members of the Development Regulations Committee. I think, does anyone want to talk about that, Sarah, Jeff? What all's required?
We just need 3 members at least, and I believe we have Nate Claire already and Commissioner Govine. We just need 1 more.
Does anybody want the job? Mr. Board of Adjustment wants the job?
I nominate Don Noble.
Dave Box.
Don, do you want it? Sure. All right. He got. Okay. Do we need to have, actually, I guess we need do we have to formally vote to affirm all 3 of them? Or as long as he accepts it, we're good?
I think we would appreciate having all 3 or 4 members stated for the record. And I'm so sorry, is it Mr. Noble that you're?
I nominated
Okay,
Don Noble.
I want to make sure, we all know Mr. Noble currently comes down here every Thursday and helps us on the Board of Adjustment.
He just doesn't spend enough time at City Hall.
Okay, just making sure.
Is Dan already on it, I guess?
Well, typically,
To the Development Regulations Committee, which, how often do they meet?
Like twice a week?
we're as,
Not very often, but next Thursday.
Yeah,
Not very often.
7:30 in the morning.
Okay, why don't we get a single motion to nominate all 3, and then we'll vote on that. So Commissioner Meek, would you revise your motion to nominate Don Noble, Dan Govine, and who's our Nate Claire?
Okay. I nominate Don Noble, Dan Govine, and Nate Claire.
Excellent. The motion is to nominate those 3. Is there a second?
Second.
Let's see if we're gonna official.
Here we are.
There you go.
There you
Sorry,
go.
Janice.
That's all right.
I beat you to it.
I guess it's seconded by Commissioners Privet and Powers. Please cast your votes.
Thank you, Don, for your service.
He just does more. He just does more than the rest of us. He is
I
an
know.
overachiever indeed.
I had like three.
Planning Commission members, Commissioner
Probably
Clare.
all three of them.
Nothing from me.
Commissioner Powers. Okay. Commissioner Meek. Commissioner Privet. Commissioner Newman.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Noble, any comments? Commissioner LaForge. I'll make a comment. I'm never happy when neighbors leave here unhappy. I take it personal. I know I should not. I hope that further discussions continue because I do believe we're really close to having something good. I will not accept this idea that just because there's rezoning that requires greater density, it automatically means that historic neighborhoods are under threat or that there is some larger issue in the city as a result of that. I think we've got to embrace the fact that we're a growing city and we have to find healthy ways to be able to grow. And I hope that we can continue to have more constructive conversations about how our neighbors in HP neighborhoods can feel respected, and at the same time, we can recognize market demand and the fact that we're a growing city. And I know it's a fine line, but I applaud the effort from both sides to try to get us closer to an agreement that was mutually acceptable. And I hate that we did not. And so I hope that we can continue with maybe perhaps with the code update and other efforts to improve our process so that we can get to a better consensus with our neighbors. I hate to see us against each other because I know that all of our intentions are good. And so I want to be a part of whatever that is. I don't know if it's the code update is the solution. I don't know if it's better community engagement is the solution. I'm just committed to it. So I hope we can figure that out. And I hope that Commissioner Powers, that the discussions with neighbors will continue. And I think it will require our leadership to keep steering people in the direction of let's keep talking. Because I do think we're really, really close to having a satisfactory product. And we shouldn't let the outcome, whether we'd have gone totally with what the neighbors wanted or totally what the applicant wanted, I would have said we still need to keep going until we get to a good place. So we live in a great city because of our character as people, the Oklahoma Standard. And I think that's going to be required of us as we continue to go through growing pains. So let's just keep fighting to be together, as much of a struggle as it is at times. So that's my plea for unity at the end of today. Planning Department?
Just one thing, we were hoping to postpone, we were thinking of having a development review committee meeting on the 22nd. However, we'd like to move that a little bit to March 14th, but I don't know if that's a spring break problem. Wanted to check calendars.
Of what day?
14th is
March
fine.
14th.
Yeah.
Planning Commission Day. Sarah, didn't Dan say he was going to be gone another day besides?
Yeah.
When was that?
I think it's 22nd.
Oh, he said the 22nd.
I think it's today and the 22nd.
If we're not sure, we can
I know
email.
my kid's spring break is the week after.
It's April 11th. April 11th.
Oh, April 11th, so.
So we're,
So whether he'll be back by the 14th or not, I guess is an open question.
we can ask him. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll plan on that tentatively and we'll ask him.
Okay. Anything else, Planning Department? Municipal Counsel's Office? Citizens to be heard? Seeing none, we've reached the end of our agenda and we're adjourned.